It's the first day of business following President Ramaphosa's announcement that the country is entering level 2 of the lockdown from midnight tonight. Strained industries like tobacco, liquor and travel will now resume economic activity on Tuesday officially, tomorrow. So we cross now to our business reporter, in fact, Wandiswa Ntengento, who is at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange to see how the market will react and whether there will be some gains recorded in the stocks of companies like British American Tobacco. Wandiswa, so the JSE opens in about 20 minutes' time. What do we expect?
Good morning, Michelle. It's certainly a new market day, and as you've said, I am at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. It's the eve of the level 2 lockdown, and the last time I was here was in March when the lockdown started, where we heard experts saying we should expect a carnage in global markets and the economy. And of course, they also told us to expect millions of jobs to be lost in the country. And unfortunately, that is our current reality, and it's also true. So now we're joined by Jimmy Muyaha, our market analyst from Axie Trader. Thank you so much, Jimmy, for joining us this morning. Now, Jimmy, on Friday, the JSE closed quite flatly, with President Ramaphosa announcing that level 2 will be coming into play on Tuesday. How do you think the market is going to react to this?
Well, I think we'll see a firmer open today. That'll be largely off the back of firmer trading session out of Asia, and as markets return to a risk-on approach and emerging markets come back into play. So I think we might see a firmer open there. I don't think it'll be largely driven as much by the level 2 adjustments as we think it will be, but that'll definitely see some strength come into the markets today.
We've certainly seen a dramatic fall in the share prices of companies listed on the JSE, specifically trading in the liquor, tobacco, and of course the travel and tourism industry. Are we thinking ahead of ourselves to think that we will see some gains in the share price in the next week or even in the next few months?
Well, I think the travel industry is still going to be hardest hit. I mean, even if we look at the recovery and the level 2 restrictions being put in place now, I think people are still going to be a bit skeptical about whether or not they engage in those travel for leisure trips and that sort of thing. A lot of the businesses are now doing their meetings via Skype and that sort of thing, so less travel is required in that respect. On the alcohol and tobacco side, I think that'll largely depend on how the government then reacts to this. So we saw that the last time they lifted the alcohol restrictions, they quickly put them back in place. So if we're still seeing that those factors are still going to be at play, then I think we might be getting a bit ahead of ourselves in hoping for a bit of optimism. But I think we'll definitely see some level of much needed normalcy start to return to the markets.
Now let's look at a commodity like gold. I mean, it's certainly been a wild ride for this commodity, but what's actually next for gold? Well,
gold's at a bit of a critical level. I mean, we're at all-time highs. We've eclipsed the highs that we saw following the 2008 financial crisis. So I think what will largely drive gold will be the global sentiment, what will happen around the US-China trade tensions, particularly as we head into the US presidential elections. Donald Trump might pull out all the stops to see how he can best win the elections and assure himself a second term. And I think largely off the back of what happens there in global markets, largely off of what happens in China and how they respond to these trade tensions, we could see people flock towards the safe haven. We could see gold go as high as $2,250, but we could also see it start to stabilize and normalize around the 1850 mark. It'll be largely driven by what happens in the global markets.
And briefly there, let's talk about banks. South African banks obviously have been impacted by COVID-19, and next week we're expecting these financial institutions to report back on how profits have declined. Are banks actually positioned to recover?
Well, if you look at our banking sector, we've actually got a very robust and very strong banking sector. They've got measures in place. Going into the lockdown, we were very strong in the banking space, and with the easing of capital adequacy requirements from the Reserve Bank side on the commercial banks, we've seen that the commercial banks have been able to free up some liquidity on their side, and I think that'll serve them in good stead. I think the banking sector will continue to remain strong. The results this week, I think a lot of the banks have priced in mean that there will be declines in revenues, there will be declines in profits, but overall I think the banking sector will remain quite strong.
And before we let you go, what are the top 3 stocks we should actually be monitoring this week?
Well, I'd be looking at Naspers, just off the back of what's happening with Tencent and the US-China trade tensions around the ban that Donald Trump has imposed on Tencent. I'd also be looking at something like RMI on the insurance front. They recently, last week, acquired Hastings in the UK. The stock last week did have a bit of a slump off the back of that because of the premium they paid, but I'm expecting them to have a very good week. They might even tap the 35 Rand mark this week as well. I'd probably also be looking around at Remgro as well, just off the back of what Remgro sits in terms of holdings. Remgro has a stake in RMI, has a stake in Distel. All of those industries are opening up again, so that could be quite a few picks to look at this week.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. Thank you for joining us. And Michelle, that is Jimmy Muyaha, their market analyst at Axie Trader, basically giving us expectations of the market and, of course, giving us a broad picture on whether we will see some gains in the share prices of companies trading in travel, in the tobacco and liquor industry. But, of course, the JSE has not opened yet, so the proof is in the pudding. We'll be able to monitor how commodity prices are moving and how the currencies are moving in a few minutes. And that's all I have for now, Michelle.
All right.